Hey, Manuela, how are you?
Hi there. I'm well. Thank you. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks very much for doing this today. Welcome to the Ozark Mountain author series, and today's your turn. We will be talking about your book, Headless Chicken. It's available in print, ebook, and audio book pretty much everywhere. So, as per tradition, I would like to ask you to start out with a little bit of your background and how things led up to the book, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay. Well, I never really planned to write a book, but funny enough, I had been starting writing books without ever having the intention to publish those books. And it was always stuff that I had on my chest, but I never really attempted to publish them. It was just kind of, oh well, kind of thing. And but this book, Headless Chicken, was my first book. And in fact, it says in the book itself how I got to do this. I went, let's say, accidentally to the Amazonian jungle in Peru to translate for shamans during ayahuasca retreats. It all happened unplanned. I saw a video on YouTube. I saw this guy talking about ayahuasca. I never ever attempted to do these shamanic drugs. I just went there because I work as a coach, as a life coach, as a holistic life coach. I work in nature. And I saw this video and I was just so inspired by the nature where this man was talking about ayahuasca. And I was that interested in where that was, could be any jungle, that I went on their website and saw this man had just died recently. And the people who took over the retreat center, they were looking for a translator, interpreter, to interpret for the shamans and the people who came there for healing. So I decided, that's me. And 2 weeks later, I was there for 3 months. And so I stayed there for 3 months. I had a whole lot of experiences. I ended up doing ayahuasca. I made little notes in the after the ceremony as well as I could. And years later, like 2 years later, I decided I got to write down my notes properly, like in the computer, to not lose it. I don't want to lose it. Make sure that you don't forget anymore, right? And so I started writing down, and as I wrote them down, I realized, that might be helpful for other people too, because those questions, everybody has those questions. Not that I would have the answer, but the way I got to the answer, that was the remarkable thing. And also that everybody gets different answers in the ayahuasca ceremonies. And so I started writing down the ceremonies. I decided if I want to write that for other people as well, I need to bring in my background stories so other people can see, other people, potential readers, can understand how I got to have the filters that I'm looking through, that I see what I see, you know? To kind of, let's say, become aware of the fabric of the matrix kind of thing. Yes.
Right.
So, and then I didn't even need that was kind of the book written already, because I knew my background stories and I just waited for them to come up. And I went along these ceremonies and the bits and pieces just fell together. This is how I wrote that book, but I didn't finish it. I had finished it. And I found a German publisher, but I wrote the book in English language, even though I am German. And I just couldn't translate it in my own mother tongue, like really bizarre. I couldn't express these weird things, let's say, the spiritual world, with my own mother tongue. It's as if there was language missing, or maybe mentality limiting or something. I just couldn't do it. So I told the German publisher, I'm sorry, I can't translate it. So they tried to translate. They also didn't manage to translate. And then I decided, maybe it's not meant to be. Leave it. And then years later, again, Ozark contacted me and asked if they could publish it worldwide. And I said yes. So that's how it happened.
Well, that's actually pretty cool. You know what? Speaking several languages, that is kind of I can see where it would be certain things and concepts would be difficult to translate. But it's just interesting that it happened for you and for the publisher as well. So it really must have been a much bigger sign to not to.
Well, the publisher was quite upset actually, because the German publisher wanted to publish the book, right? They had put quite some effort in it too, but they said, we can't do it either. It's just, they couldn't do it. And then leaving it in the English language, the way it came out of me, it was ready to go. We didn't change so much editing.
Right.
And
And so,
mm,
no, please go ahead.
I think it has to do with different languages have different heritage, different door openings, and are better for certain things and other are better for other things. That's what I feel. A little bit like Latin, right? Latin is probably great for so many things like scientific stuff, and not so great for other stuff to express emotions or something.
Right, right.
Mhm.
So, Manuela, please tell me then a little bit about the book.
Well, like I just expressed before, I had this experience. It already started really bizarre to get there. I never planned to go to the jungle. I never planned to do shamanic drugs, and I did 19 ceremonies. And the book describes the 19 ceremonies and also my background stories. Not that my background stories were super special or more horrifying or more beautiful than others. It's just a different filter, right? And I think this is what makes the book quite interesting, because it becomes pretty clear that your background stories, even though they don't maybe shocking, yes, or sad, but they do help you see things in a certain way. And I explain pretty well how it comes that we see the world in a certain way, and we constantly get proof in reality that our beliefs are true, and they are not. Like, maybe I give you an example of what I mean by that.
Sure.
Okay, so before I go to the ayahuasca ceremonies, let's say one big thing in my life was when I was 6 years old. I woke up in the morning and I felt like anxiety, shock, didn't know why, and I ran, instead of downstairs to my parents, I went to the neighbors, and I said, I'm afraid, I'm afraid, I'm afraid. And I had never had anxiety or anything before. I didn't know what was going on. Turns out my father had died that morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. And since I was a little child, my brothers were 5 and 3 years older than me. They wanted to protect me from the total truth, and they told me a lie to protect me. So nobody wanted anything bad, right? And they said my father had died from a heart attack. He was 36 years old, 3 small children, big business, lots of work, wonderful woman, wife, houses, and everything, right? But the reality was he had committed suicide. And I was the only one in the whole village who didn't know the truth. So when I started to go to school that year, the kids at school, they talked behind my back. And I observed And I could see they are talking behind my back, but I didn't know why. I also could feel they don't have anything against me, but they do talk behind my back. So I thought, there must be something wrong with me. Something that they don't want to tell me. Something is not right, and it's me, because everybody seems to be, I'm out of there. I'm in a different boat here, you see?
Right.
And now you have this tiny little belief, and you start seeing in the world or interpreting, these traumatic things that you totally believe there's something wrong with you. You don't know what. Scary. That's not safe. You have to be really, really, really careful to not do anything wrong and these things, right? And later on in life, I mean, when I was 19, I left home. I went far away to explore what else. I had a feeling I need to go away and toss myself into the big, great nothingness where I don't know anything, in order to figure out how life works, like a self-induced initiation kind of thing, without ever thinking about it. It was just my intuition to do this. And so I went there. After 2 years, I came back. I studied. Later, I married, had 2 children, ran a business in Munich, traveled the world, did a pilot's license, so you name it, kind of thing. And but it was not nothing for me. It was just didn't really feel satisfied or super happy or something. When I was 35 years old, I remember my mom was visiting, and no, hang on, I forgot one thing. I described this in the book. When I came home after 2 years, after leaving at age 19, I accidentally found out the truth about my father's death. My mom was at home, and she said, she was sad, and I said, what's going on? Tell me about it. Just like when I was a kid, that was the typical situation. She was kind of sad, and I was like, tell me what's going on? How can I help you? And so on, yeah. And she said, oh, nothing. She didn't want to talk. I insisted, and I stayed with her and asked her, come on, tell me, please. It's better to talk. Please tell me. And so, and then she said, oh, your stepfather, he was so mean to you, to her. I said, what did he say? And he said, if you continue like that, you're going to end up like with your first husband. And then I said, but that's ridiculous, Mom. Why should he get a heart attack? And then she says, oh, you don't know the truth? I say, what do you mean? Your father hung himself. And at age 21, there was a brand new reality showing up. And I realized, whoa, everything that I lived so far was seen through different filters. I'm not, you know, and that changed a lot. And I was never mad at my father for dying, but in my little world, God didn't like me because he took my father. I realized with knowing this, what my mom had told me about the truth that my father committed suicide, changed my whole vision of life, my reality. I became clear that my reality was based on a lie. The way I feel about myself, the way I see the world and interpret the world was based on a lie. It's not true. I didn't know. I was just missing a tiny piece of information, and that totally messed up a lot. But the story continues. When I was 35, I already had 2 children. And one day my mom was visiting, And she said, I remember still sitting in that car driving up the hill. She said, imagine Mr. Corol's daughter, she died, liver cirrhosis, and she never drank. And all of a sudden, another little piece came out of, or into, or wherever, my mind. And I remembered something. And I said, I'm sure she drank, because I remembered a conversation I had with Mr. Corol. And I thought, oh my God, you are totally nuts. I remembered a situation just shortly after my father passed. We moved to my grandmother's house, and she gave us a whole, a floor to live on. And Mr. Carol, who had taken over my dad's interior decoration business, he renovated the place, and I was in my pajamas, for some reason by myself with this man, and he touched me. I wasn't supposed to touch there. I knew this is wrong, but I could not tell anybody. I couldn't scream. I couldn't, because I was supposed to obey older people and don't know what. And I couldn't talk to anybody anyway. And my mom was in a difficult situation as, single mom, not single mom. She remarried again. But at that time, obviously, she wasn't remarried. She was just a brand new widow with three small children. And she was on volume. And there was just nobody there. And this is when this happened. And I had forgotten about it because I couldn't cope as a kid. So I learned not just about myself and the stories from the past, how they can fade the vision of the world, but I also learned the functioning of the human brain in general, not just my own story. I realized, oh yeah, this is how we, function. We forget, we remember, we change the story without even knowing. For us, it's absolutely true, because I did see that those kids talked behind my back. It was real. But later on, you interpret everything related to you, things like that. So that are the backgrounds, some of the backgrounds. There's more stories, and it sounds horrible, suicide, sexual abuse, and things like that. It sounds horrible, but at the end of the day, it's just learning lessons. As long as we don't stamp them into good and bad, it's just learning lessons that teach you about the human condition, and I often feel like I am the playwright, the screen, how do you call this? A screenwriter who writes a film? Right. Yes. The actor and the director in my own movie. I am creating a movie and I'm playing in it. And this whole book kind of describes a little bit how it works, that you don't realize that you're an actor and that you're the screenwriter and the director, right? You are trapped in a little drama, being either the victim or the helper or the prosecutor or something. Yeah. And well, that's one part of the book. And the other part, how I started, was I wanted to share the ayahuasca part as well. And I wanted to make it very clear that ayahuasca is quite a hype nowadays. And every other person who took ayahuasca then feels inspired to become an ayahuasca shaman. And it's also a big business. But in former times, only the shamans would take ayahuasca and not all the people. It's become a trend, let's say. I did it 19 times. That's a lot. And the reason why I did it was because I was curious, and they did it too. So I was influenced by this environment where I was, and also the curiosity, because when you take ayahuasca, it might stay. For me, it took forever to get out of ayahuasca again. I'm very sensitive. It took, at night, I could, you start a ceremony at 8 o'clock at night, and usually 1, 2, 3 o'clock, people start going home. I was always an hour or two longer there in this Malacca, in the hut in the jungle, before I could get on my feet, and my body was working again. It couldn't get on my feet anymore. But I was super calm about it, as if I was totally convinced that that's okay, and I don't have to worry. Other people freaked out. It's also an interesting thing. I didn't freak out, and I'm not very drug proofed. I can't even smoke pot without leaving the body, kind of thing, I'm not into. I'm just very sensitive. So the very first ayahuasca ceremony was the most profound one for me. And all the people who were there during these 3 months, there were people there for a week, for 2 weeks, for a month, for several months. And it seemed like everybody gets just enough time as they need and the messages they can take. They don't get more than they can't cope with. And some also got a little hit on the, like a clap on the back kind of thing. Yeah, I didn't for some reason. The first ayahuasca ceremony, I could see, I remember thinking, this doesn't work for me. I've been waiting forever. I'm not journeying at all. I'm still thinking, blah, blah, blah. And then sometimes I forgot about this all, and I was not in the body anymore, but, seeing all these wild forms and colors you've never seen before, endless creativity, shapes and forms moving, and it just never, it wasn't the same, it was always changing, like, this doesn't stop, and it becomes, I was in total awe, right?
Right.
And I thought, what's that about? And wow, and there was no more me and you and physical bodies and stuff. It was just beautiful energy and endless shapes and creativity, just like an orchestra of colors and shapes. Yeah? And then at some point, I remember I moved my head. I don't know if I did move my head, but I saw, all of a sudden, I saw something else. I saw. Have you seen the movie, the musical Les Misérables?
Yes, but
Yes.
only in movie-wise.
Yes.
Never seen it in person.
There is this gray and dark and ugly and more dark and hopeless and all these things. So all of a sudden, I see this like humanity almost crawling on the floor, like. Not animalistic, but certainly dark and not very hopeful, very devastated, and no vision and no nothing, like just doing the same thing, and yes. And I thought, I don't know if I thought, but I saw. And then I changed again, and I realized, for some reason, it's made out of the same stuff. It's moving energy. And this is one picture, this miserable thing where the humans crawl on the floor all devastated. And then there's this field of endless creativity, but it's made out of the same stuff. That was my first ayahuasca ceremony, and that was big. So that in the very moment, you can't really explain what it means. But then the next day, when you come, I mean, you go in your hut in the jungle, and for me it took forever. All night I was journeying, it never stopped, and I was tired. And but you can't stop it, you see. But then the next day, slowly, you're coming back into this habitual state of mind with this brand new hole that you've looked through. You can't make this undone. You know, there is something else out there. You've seen it. But how do you make it fit to what was before, right? Then the regular mind kicks back in and tries to make sense of things so it fits together with your beliefs. It just everything has to make sense, because otherwise you are lost, right? And so then I interpreted this first ceremony as, this is about duality. It can be beautiful, it can be ugly, it's made out of the same stuff. It depends on how you look at it. Interesting. That was the first ceremony. And then I just kept on going and saw different things and weird stuff. And the other people had different ceremonies. And at some point I decided I'm not going to share my story or what I saw in the night in detail anymore at the breakfast room, because it felt a little bit almost like social media. Everybody shares their stories. People compare their stories with other stories, and I felt this is absolutely not the right thing to do right now. You're just, the best thing would have been to just process this for yourself, go into silence, into nature, and not talk it all flat. You see?
Right.
So I kept going to ceremonies. I describe all the ceremonies in this book. It's a bit chaotic because that's how it was. There is no rules as such, and yet it seemed quite divine, the whole setting. At one point I saw giving birth to myself, and it really hurt, and I bit my own hand. And at one point, I saw the shaman, one of the shamans. There were always two shamans, and one of them, he was third generation shaman. Later on, his mother, who was also a shaman, came as well, and gave a totally different quality to that session. When the two shamans, they were Chipivos, which is local indigenous people there, singing Icaros, which is certain songs, really bizarre songs. And the shaman wanted me to learn Icaros and sing with him, but I didn't hear the call. Funny enough, later on, I started doing music by myself, but I never thought about that. But anyway, so one day the shaman asked me, or told me, in the light of the day, tonight I'm going to sing to heal your childhood trauma. And I thought, what does he know? You know, I didn't tell him anything. Maybe he saw something, maybe he didn't. I'm not going to give it much thought. Just let myself be surprised. Yes? So in the evening, I went to the ceremony. I didn't expect much, but I do remember that ceremony very well, because I was lying there. I was already gone, and I heard him sing as if he would sing right behind me, but he was not singing behind me. He was singing in front of me. So everything is distorted and different. And I heard him sing. And they were singing every night. I didn't know that he was singing for me. But in that moment, I mean, he said so, but while I was journaling, I didn't remember that. It was an energetic thing happening. And in that moment, I flipped my upper body up and sit in a lotus position kind of thing, or tailor seat, straight, and my head all the way in my lap, almost cramped together like this. And I start crying, and I never stopped crying. I cried tears. I felt like I'm crying tears from this lifetime and 10 other lifetimes and other people's tears. I cried and cried and never cried. And all of a sudden I felt like I remembered that situation with this man who touched me, because what I told you before, when I remembered the storyline, that was just the words that were told, the gestures, what he did, but it was not emotional. It was just when you watch a movie, an external story, you see a story there. Oh, wow. Bam, 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 bam. Yes. But this time in that ceremony, it was energetic and emotional. The whole thing was in motion and devastated, and I was this little child in that moment, and the tears would not stop. And I was so devastated. I felt like that was it. You just have to go through this life with this load on your shoulder. You can't make it undone. It's on your chest, it's on your shoulders, it's happened. You can't make it undone. You can't tell anybody. You are done. That was my feeling, like total devastation. And I cried and cried. And I remember at some points I thought, I just don't want to be no more. And that was my feeling as well as a kid. I do remember. I mean, as a kid, you don't think about whether you are happy or whether you are sad. You just are what you are, and you don't think about depression or stuff like that, right? But I do remember I often thought as a kid, to calm myself down, worst case, I can always kill myself. That was my thought. And I didn't know that anybody had killed themselves, you know? So, well, that was quite illuminating, and heavy. And at some point, like I said, this Icaros, it's a little bit like the songs that they sing. It's really bizarre, like very wah, 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 wah. They're really bizarre music, very bizarre, weird, no? And it is as if it was blowing air into the fire and the energy was moving more, like inspiring the movement, right? Like with these songs. And at some point, all my crying, I was all empty. And I remember I had a feeling someone was behind me. And I even looked back as if there was somebody sitting on a big chair. You know these chairs they have in India, looking like a lotus, like wood-carved chairs.
Yeah.
Yes? And so I look behind me and see this wood-carved chair, and I look up and I realize there's like a queen sitting on this chair, and I realize that's me. It's me. And so it felt like I had healed that little child, and all of a sudden I was in a perfectly working, beautiful body. And all this old stuff has been cried out, That was very intense. And you would think healing is done, correct? Ayahuasca has healed you and so on. But it turned out it's not like that. It's just another layer. So in the meantime, I'm laughing because with time, it's really just like a very good story, and it all makes sense, or we make sense of it. And I learned to sell myself the story as an exciting movie instead of horrifying, shocking, and so on. You see, and I'm more curious. It doesn't mean that I don't suffer. I still suffer, and I still have this right and wrong thing in my brain. But when it hurts a lot, then I remember to change perspective and to realize the bigger picture and the wider perspective.
So, Manuela, in your book, so besides then telling the story, do you then kind of extrapolate the lessons learned, or do you just kind of leave it up to the reader themselves to see, oh, okay, this is what she found out, and that's what happened?
I kind of leave it up to the reader because I make it very clear that this is what I saw through my filters and my background story. Obviously, what I interpret is also through my filters and my background stories. And you have a different filter and background stories. And it doesn't serve you anything to look through my filters. What helps you is figure out your own filters and look behind those. That's why I'm not a big fan of in coaching as well. When I work as a coach, I'm not a big fan of. I mean, I'm happy to share my vision and my beliefs, but I make it very clear that's just my little picture of the whole story, my little interpretation at this very moment, and tomorrow it can look differently as well.
You know, I find that interesting that what you said is that people truly, at least this is a judgment and a, I guess, in my opinion on, I guess, journeys themselves. Um,
Mhm.
Most people that are truly serious about themselves or wanting to find, something to be healed, to find answers to something that was very difficult in their lives, they keep looking and keep uncovering these different layers. You know, only a few people that I've known, they would like first experience of any kind, whether it's a trip of some sorts or whatever. They just want to tell everybody. I was like, why don't you just take some time on your own just to figure this out? It was like, oh, I did. I did then. It made perfect sense. And then later on, you know, they would still kind of not be over it. So I find that interesting when you said that it's just kind of the first layer, and you just keep on looking and working at it.
Yeah, and I personally think, um, huh, that's big what I want to say. um, we are already perfect with the layers, and that's just the human experience. We come on earth with those layers in order to peel and let the flower out, or the lotus out. And there's if it was already out there like this, there would be no more story to this book of life.
Hmm. Right. So, Manuela, when it basically, did you have, you know, was it also like a at that time while you were putting it down? I know you wanted to for it to just kind of not kind of disappear out of your memory, but were
Mhm.
you also then hoping that this would actually help somebody, or were you just kind of wanting to put everything down and have it out there and available and just kind of leaving it at that?
I did want this to help somebody, especially the people who are looking for answers with ayahuasca. I wanted to make it clear that I almost got stuck and I went again and again and again. You can go forever. People make it a lifestyle. And that's just another, let's say, decision. It's not good, it's not bad. I don't think it is necessary, you know. But searching for the answers, the big question, answers to the big questions, just with ayahuasca, I think that's a bit, oh, it sounds bad, but I'm going to say it. It sounds cheap. Yeah, cheap.
Right.
Uh-huh. I do totally believe that having faith in life as such and in the process of life, and I call it the magic behind nature, or the intelligence behind nature, which nobody thinks how it works really and knows how it works. Nobody really does. With science, we describe it, but nobody really knows this fabric of God, right? Um, I am absolutely, um, I don't want to say convinced because convinced is here, but it's more a gut feeling and a heart
Right.
feeling that everything happens to the right time and the right moment. And this surrendering into it, that's the way it works. And then the flower comes out at the right moment, when the temperature is right, when there's enough water, and so on. And then the bits and pieces fall together. This hard work, or manipulating things, or pushing things, or selling things. I do not think that this is the way to go. I think we humans can be a little more humble in that way. We are huge and big, and we are this creativity, and we are nature, and at the same time, we are. I always have this metaphor of a grain of sand on the beach. It sounds super insignificant. When I was a kid, I was playing on the beach a lot. And I remember as a small child, you're sitting on the beach, nothing but sand and water, and it was paradise. You don't think about tomorrow, you don't think about later, you're so very much in the moment, and there's nothing but sand and water, right? And it is
Right.
paradise. Many people have experienced something similar. So I always have this metaphor. I'm like a grain of sand on the beach. It sounds like super insignificant. And there's so many more like me. And yet I am individual. I am what makes the beach and the water on the beach. Without me, there's no beach and no water and no story around it. And also, a grain of sand to me is like an unpolished diamond, a raw diamond, and it is life and the waves of the ocean that polishes the diamond, you know, so that beauty can come out. That's a bit the metaphor I have, and this whole life experience so far, which I describe in the book and that I've seen in ayahuasca ceremonies. Let's say the spiritual, for me, yes, with my perspective, the spiritual world is not somewhere else in ayahuasca in the jungle, nor is it here by some ayahuasca shaman coming, bringing the drugs and having some ceremony in somebody's living room. Yeah, there is not another world. Let's say what they call the upper world and the lower world. It's just a way to describe phenomena in a way that we can capture it with our little mind. But at the end of the day, for me, it's all moving energy, and we have the capacity as humans to become aware of things. And we can even choose if we go to the Misérables or to the other side. We can smoke pot all day long and see beautiful things, LSD and stuff, and feel love and things, right? That's just another decision. Or we can meditate, or we just can go for a walk in nature and still find some kind of peace in a more natural, very simple way. And it's all about choices. We do have choices, and in order to have choices or freedom, you have to have limitations as well. If there are no limitations, I've had similar experiences in this lifetime where I had freed myself from a lot of restrictions. The kids left home, they were on their own. I managed to rent out my place. I had an income. I didn't have to worry about blah, blah, blah. And I could basically do what I wanted to do. Yeah, I want to share, I want to be creative and this and that. And I realized, wow, if everything is possible, where do you start? So that again shifts the perspective to what is positive and what is negative anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
So, well, it's one of these. So, in a way, when you describe it, I mean, did you did you have a goal in mind for somebody that you want him to get out of this, out of the book? Or is it basically kind of like, not saying everyone has their own choice and own steps that they can take. And I always, whenever I happen to talk to people and based on my own experiences, I always say, well, this is what I would do, before I give him some kind of advice. Because let's say, would you say that ayahuasca is for everybody, or is it for those that are intrigued about it, that they should
Well,
follow up on it more?
one thing I did write the book for was everybody asked me about ayahuasca, and I wrote all this to share my experience for people to recognize it's different for everybody, and you don't need to go this path. If you feel a strong calling to do this, you can do it. If you're super fearful about it, you're probably going to have a certain experience. Yes. And you've
Right.
got to learn to trust your own gut feelings. I couldn't, I do not like to give advice, but I am sharing my experiences. And in this book, the book is basically for people who have been thinking about ayahuasca and people who are interested in personal development to and spirituality, to bring the things together. It describes a little bit how, with an unscientific way, just by exploration and by observation of my own life in these different states, how the human mind works and how it comes that we create this reality, which is
Right.
not really real. How can we see things? There's this saying, it's a saying, quantum physics. Who's that? Remember the movie, What the Bleep Do We Know?
Yes, I don't know.
Well,
I
it
don't know
was,
who
who were the
started it,
people
but
again?
yes.
I think it was, what's his name? Bruce. No, I can't get it together now. Sorry. Anyway, but one thing they say is the object changes with the eye of the observer.
Right.
So we we need to realize that we create our own story, and the way we see the story, the way we perceive the story, the way we feel about the story, and we can change the storyline in any time. We don't have to lie, ignore, and the more honest we can be with ourselves, which is not easy. It's not a willingness, it's a capacity to learn this, because we have not been taught to be honest with ourselves. We have been taught to function and to think. And
Right.
thinking and functioning doesn't help to be honest. It's great when you know how mathematics work and physics. I love mathematics. It's so logical and undeniable and unnegotiable. Yes, I like
Right.
that. However, it doesn't serve for everything, these things. This other part that we do not learn in our society, trusting your gut feelings, that's one thing ayahuasca can't teach you either. Because there's this time when the ceremony is over and you're not going to be 24/7 on ayahuasca, and just for having seen something, at some point, it's there, but your everyday's life has to do a lot with awareness, a high level of awareness, and training your daily awareness. There's such a thing, they call it, I think, spiritual ego, right? You've
Hmm.
seen something, you know something, and all of a sudden you think you're the king. You know how things work now. You're done for the rest of this lifetime. Yes.
Right.
um, and I don't think that works like that. I think you have to be. It's kind of a daily work. It,
Right.
and I don't like the word work so much. I like to sell myself the story. I can make this a play with a little lighter, less hard. I don't think the magic behind nature is meant for us to live a harsh, hard life. I think the playfulness that is natural. I think this is super, super, super important. And it's nothing that you can study. It's about letting go, exploring, experimenting, discovering, becoming curious about the things you don't know yet, about the things you can't even imagine, about the things that are impossible because they have not been discovered yet. And that's a bit the idea that I see looking through this hole, you know?
Right. Well, Manuela, thank you very much for the great recollecting and retelling of your experiences and the story. I think that gives it a really good idea what your book is about and the things that one can hope to get from it when reading it. In conclusion, I wanted to just basically leave you with the last word. If you have anything else that you would like to add.
Well, if I would like to add something, see, people are interested in these things to find out more about themselves, right? And if I'd like to add one thing, it's make the path finding out about yourself an exciting one. Instead of trying to reach that goal as if you want to climb the Himalayas and better go with a helicopter. No, you make it an exciting path to find out who you are. That's what I would like.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So, as always, below this video in the description, I'm going to have all the links to your sites and where they can get the book. Obviously, it's everywhere else, but I'll still leave some links behind so it makes it more convenient. And I'm glad we're able to connect today. I know there's about a 7 hour difference between you and I. I'm in the U.S., you're in Spain, but I'm glad we're able to do this today.
Thank you. I'm glad too. Thank you for your interest in my little sharing. And it was a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, good to see you again, and we'll talk again.
Sounds good to me. Thank you.